of agency implementation of the Federal Information Technology Acquisition Reform Act, in addition to other critical IT laws incorporated into the biannual FITARA scorecard. The scorecard holds agencies accountable for improving their IT postures. In practice, the scorecard is a tool for Congress and the public to ensure better cybersecurity, reduce wasteful spending, and make government service to the nation more effective. Throughout this pandemic, we've come to realize how vital agile IT and strong IT governance are to the success of the federal government in meeting the needs of the people we all serve. Today's hearing will discuss the results of the 12th iteration of the FITARA scorecard. This hearing will also focus on how Congress and the administration can work together to improve services to this nation. We'll examine how we can effectively modernize IT across the federal government, including making changes to administration guidance and adding new oversight metrics to the scorecard itself in order to hold agencies accountable for transforming how government does business. Today we'll also hear for the first time from the new federal CIO, Claire Martorana, about the administration's federal IT priorities, including how it plans to administer the recent $1 billion Technology Modernization Fund approved by Congress. And additionally, we'll hear how she plans to prioritize projects to retire legacy federal IT systems, to accelerate agencies' transition to emerging technologies, improve federal cybersecurity, and to implement actions from lessons learned from the pandemic. The fact that Ms. Martorana is, am I pronouncing that right? Martorana is here today is a clear indication of the Biden administration's commitment and recognition of the significance of FITARA and federal IT investments themselves. Since the December 2020 scorecard, 4 agencies, FITARA scorecard grades increased, 2 decreased, and 18 remained unchanged. Nearly all agencies received a passing grade. Unfortunately for some agencies and in some categories, progress has slowed. I hope to hear from our witnesses in OMB about transcending the hurdles to improved IT and to ensure efficient IT acquisition and management practices. We must continue to strive for the dividends reaped from modernizing legacy IT systems, migrating to the cloud, and maintaining a strong and robust and protective cyber posture. Despite some backsliding, the scorecard demonstrates continued improvements in many categories. Since the scorecard's inception in 2015, agencies have made substantial positive strides in improving their information technology practices. For example, historically, agencies have reported that poor-performing projects are often broadly scoped and aim to deliver functionality several years after initiation. FITARA, however, requires agency CIOs to ensure that IT investments are adequately implementing incremental development practices and that functionality is timely. Since 2015, the portion of agencies' IT projects implemented incrementally has risen from 58% to 78%. Among the FITARA scorecard categories with the greatest impact on taxpayer savings is the IT portfolio review process known as Portfolio Stat. Since 2015, the amount of money agencies have reportedly saved, including the costs they've avoided as a result of their Portfolio Stat effort, has risen from $3.4 billion to $23.5 billion. This increase includes $1.3 billion related to eliminating duplicative software licenses and about $7 billion in savings on data center consolidation. I might add, parenthetically, this committee will insist that the law be complied with in full. The law circumscribes how data center consolidation is to occur, and we will not suffer any dilution in the idea of data center consolidation or in the metrics surrounding it. We will insist the law be complied with, and if necessary on a bipartisan basis, I believe we are prepared to pass additional legislation for clarification if that is needed. Hopefully it won't be. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses on how they can continue to save taxpayer dollars while also ensuring agencies improve and fortify their IT infrastructures to better serve the public. In addition to modernizing and acquiring the right technology, agencies must fill the skills gap in IT positions across the federal government, a big challenge. Our federal IT workforce is rapidly aging into retirement. As of March of 2021, 3.3% of the federal government's full-time IT employees were under the age of 30, 3.3%. 52.5% were over the age of 50. Federal agencies must focus on recruiting and hiring young IT professionals with the knowledge and skills needed to address the technology challenges of tomorrow. At the very first FITARA hearing, former Department of Transportation CIO Richard McKinney stated, IT is no longer just the business of the CIO, it's everybody's business. Never has this been truer or clearer than in the wake of the coronavirus pandemic, where IT saved thousands of lives by enabling telework and keeping the government and the economy running. We've seen firsthand how the agencies that continued to use outdated IT during the pandemic struggled to serve the very people who rely on them. Some agencies remain marred in backlogs, including the National Archives and Records Administration, which failed to digitize critical veterans' records. And we're now paying a price for that. The Archives now reports a years-long backlog in providing veterans access to records that qualify them for medical treatment, unemployment assistance, home loans, and student loans. That's why I joined the ranking member, Mr. Heiss, in urging the National Archivist to apply for IT modernization funds so government can keep its commitments to our nation's veterans. Unfortunately, NARA is not the only federal agency plagued by legacy IT systems. Congress and the administration must work together to prioritize IT modernization across the federal government. With the Delta variant on the rise across the country and vaccinations flatlining, the stakes for effectively implementing FITARA are higher than ever. When executed well, government IT modernization can ensure the efficient delivery of critical services. It can improve the government's knowledge and decision-making and save lives. When executed poorly, it leads to outright failures in serving the American people when they need the government the most. And we've seen that, too, in the pandemic. Simply put, the fate of the world's largest economy actually rises and falls, in part, with the ability of the government IT systems to deliver in an emergency. The importance of federal agencies' effective use of IT is too great to ignore, and this subcommittee won't waver in its continued oversight of agencies' IT acquisition and management. And I might say this is our 12th scorecard hearing. I don't believe there's another committee in Congress that can match this record on a single piece of legislation in terms of oversight. That's how committed we are and have been on a bipartisan basis throughout the years. And of course, the co-author of FITARA, Mr. Heiss, will be joining us a little bit later in this subcommittee hearing, and we're very pleased to have him back. So with that, Chair recognizes the distinguished ranking member, Mr. Heiss from Georgia, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you holding this hearing. And first of all, I do want to welcome Claire Martirona for joining us today and for your first time as the role of the Federal Chief Information Officer. We welcome you here today. And given your experience as an agency CIO, I really am interested to get your perspective on the FITARA scorecard and the IT dashboard, and for that matter, actually to help agency CIOs manage their portfolios and help OMB with its own government-wide oversight efforts, or if these are just big reporting exercises. I look forward to hearing your perspective on all of that. As the Chairman said, this is the 12th time that we've had a FITARA scorecard. I know it's changed over time, but to me, the overriding question is, and always will be, are we spending federal IT dollars well? I mean, at the end of the day, that is the issue. And, you know, are projects coming in on time? Are they on budget? Do they do what they're supposed to do? Why or why not? I mean, these are just basic questions that we need to face and that we need answers for, and that we need to keep a pulse on as we go through all of this. These are important questions, And the answers to these questions shine the light on pretty much everything else, whether it's procurement, workforce, organizational structure, culture, and on and on. So the scorecard has evolved in the past. Frankly, I think it's time that we take a fresh look at the whole FITARA process through the lens that I've just described, with any reported metrics reflecting measurable legislation or executive branch policies. We've got to be objective and quantifiable, and it needs to be reported in a manner that is comparable agency to agency. So I get it that all of that is probably easier said than done. I mean, I know that, but nothing around this place is easy. But I'd like to take a good look at these type of things, frankly, before we move on to FITARA 13 and 14. I also think the subcommittee needs to take a good look at a few other issues, Mr. Chairman, and I would put this out there. What is the state of IT modernization, generally speaking? I know Congress passed the MGT Act, and now there's billions of dollars, really, in technology modernization. Those funds are to be spread around, but what's its impact? What are we really getting in relation to modernization? Is it happening? Is it having the impact that it's going to point towards the kinds of modernization experiences that you've described in your testimony, Ms. Martirana? Secondly, are our systems safe? This is an issue that's come up time and again in hearings. As much as any system can be safe, are our systems safe? In its testimony, the GAO's top concern revolve around cyber issues. This is an issue we've got to deal with, and I believe the scorecard needs to hone in on those types of questions. Given the critical nature of the topic, is it enough just to have it to be a subcomponent of the broader scorecard, or is it time to figure out a way to shine the spotlight on this area without tipping off the bad guys of our vulnerabilities? I think we have got to address this. And then finally, how well are the American people being served? I think the scorecard needs to reflect this. At the end of the day, the federal government is here to serve the American people, and we need to know how effective we are doing in that. How easy is it to access government services and benefits through digital means? In the private sector, you don't survive for long if you don't excel in this area, and I believe we need to take a look at it on the federal perspective as well. And Ms. Martirana, again, in your testimony, we share the view that you said, quote, the federal government is fundamentally in the service business. Totally agree with you on that. In fact, I couldn't agree more. So all of the items that I've mentioned here are important, but I would like to specifically ask my colleague from Virginia, Chairman Connolly, if we could look at some of these issues going forward. I think these are worthy not only of attention, but of fine-tuning the scorecard as a whole. I'll just put that out there. I'm not finished. But
I'd respond to my colleague, of course. And in fact, I definitely see the FITARA scorecard as always a work in progress.
Right.
And the only caution is, as you can see even from the grades in front of us, we have not yet succeeded in full implementation. So we don't want to lose our sight of that. But we also always want to be capturing other dynamics as we learn and as we see performance in the federal government. So I couldn't agree with you more.
Thank
and
you,
absolutely will work you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And the last point I'll make is this. I've made clear the focus of the administration. They should be having federal employees return to their offices, but I'm concerned that the emphasis instead appears to be on institutionalizing expanded telework. So I'm glad that we're joined by a CIO of Social Security Administration today as well. So this is one of the agencies facing the greatest challenge in providing the American people with services that they need. And if SSA is not going to reopen more rapidly, then I'll be interested to learn how improved IT can help improve the citizens' experience. So in closing, again, I want to thank our witnesses for being here. I'm eager to hear the insight, the suggestions as we move on to FITARA 13 and 14 and beyond. I look forward to hearing our discussion today. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back. Thank you.
I thank the ranking member, and I thank him for his cooperation in this and other endeavors. I see we've been joined by the ranking member of the full committee. Does he wish to make any statement? Okay. Welcome, Mr. Comer. Glad to have you. With that, let me introduce our witnesses. We have 4 witnesses today, and I'm going to swear them in, but first let me introduce them. Our first witness is Claire Martirana, who is the Federal Chief Information Officer, finally, at the Office of Management and Budget. We're so glad to have you today. Then we're going to hear from Keith Bluestein, Chief Information Officer at the Small Business Administration. Third, we'll hear from Sean Brune, Chief Information Officer of the Social Security Administration. And finally, we will hear from our long partner, Carol Harris, Director of Information Technology and Cybersecurity at the GAO, the Government Accountability Office, which actually helped design and continues to help us update and modify the scorecard. If all of our witnesses could stand and raise their right hand to be sworn in, which is the custom of this committee and subcommittee. Do you swear to affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Mr. Brune?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Let the record show all 4 of our witnesses have answered in the affirmative. You may be seated. Thank you. With that, Ms. Martirana, you are recognized for your opening statement. We'll ask all of our witnesses, if you could, your full statement will be entered into the record as written. We'd ask you to try to summarize your testimony in a 5-minute opening statement. Ms. Martirana.
Chairman Connolly, Ranking Member Heiss, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the invitation to testify about the 12th FITARA scorecard. Technology enables mission delivery. It's FITARA that gives every CIO a seat at the table to make the best IT decisions to deliver for our citizens, and it's enterprise collaboration that will be key to making it all happen. I'd like to thank the committee for your leadership promoting modernization. I believe we must take on this challenge together to secure federal IT and deliver transformational services to the American people. I'd also like to acknowledge Sean, Keith, and my fellow CIOs and the entire IT workforce across our government for their hard work to achieve the grades on this scorecard. Imagine the day when a citizen can use their mobile phone to sign in and see everything that they have in flight with our government. A small business loan application, the status of their tax refund. Imagine the process is easy, understandable, convenient, secure, and fast, just like the experiences we have with online banking and food delivery. With the amount of information we collect across the federal government and the enormous investment, taxpayer dollars in federal IT, this vision is not only possible, it is an expectation in the 21st century. For over 20 years in the private sector and the past 5 years in government, I have used innovative technology and human-centered design to improve people's lives. As federal CIO, I will use my expertise to scale these successes across the federal enterprise. Federal employees are counting on us. And more importantly, your constituents, the American people, are not only counting on us, they're asking us to move faster. We can get there by focusing on 3 priorities that address the long-term goals and urgent circumstances we find ourselves in today. First, cybersecurity is our immediate priority in federal IT. Cybersecurity is a national priority. I am committed to ensuring every agency is ready for today's threats. The Cyber Executive Order puts us on a good path to faster incident response and stronger protective measures. By working rapidly and seamlessly, we can achieve results, and we must. Our adversaries are on the move, and they are aggressive. Second, I am committed to modernizing federal IT. The $1 billion appropriation to the Technology Modernization Fund, or TMF, is an important start to improving the government's IT systems. But it's just a down payment on the multi-year technology modernization projects federal agencies have identified. The TMF board has received 108 proposals in our accelerated model, totaling $2.1 billion since the rollout of the funding provided by the American Rescue Plan. And third, we must focus on service delivery to the American public. It is not our citizens' job to figure out how to navigate across a department or agency silos to gather the services they deserve. That's our job. By transitioning agencies to a product mindset organized around users, we can deliver modern, efficient tools and technology, reduce administrative burden, and spend more time on high-value services to the public. These challenges have highlighted our need to rethink our approach to federal IT. We must identify new ways of working across government, such as developing playbooks that build on what we know already works, collaborate more frequently with key stakeholders to focus oversight on the work being done today, and rethinking how we're working in the Office of the Federal CIO, such as pairing technologists with our policy experts at the beginning of the process to develop innovative technology solutions within our laws, rules, and regulations. Finally, we must optimize for results, not optics. We need to show, not tell, and deliver on our mission. As we begin this new chapter of federal IT modernization, we are building on a strong foundation. I'm excited to enable the government's diverse missions as federal CIO, and I look forward to partnering with Congress. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today, and I am happy to take your questions.
Wow, that's a pro. You had 11 seconds left. I'm impressed. Great start, and we look forward to working with you as well. Mr. Bluestein, is it pronounced Bluestein or Bluestein? Mr. Bluestein, excuse me. Welcome.
Good afternoon, sir. Chairman Connolly, Ranking Member Heiss, Subcommittee members, thank you for the opportunity to discuss the Small Business Administration's implementation of FITARA. Much has changed since the last time we talked to you about FITARA in 2017. To the great benefit of SBA and America's small businesses, FITARA has provided the critical structure and tools for SBA to optimize, modernize, and innovate while investing in the IT workforce of tomorrow. I'd also like to add some of the benefits that SBA has enjoyed courtesy of the Modernizing Government Technology Act of 2017, or the MGT Act. This modernization foundation was vital in enabling exponential scaling of SBA's operations to deliver the nation's largest ever economic recovery initiative in a very short period of time. Just to recall the scale, by October of 2020, SBA's disaster program approved and dispersed more than 3 times as many funds for the COVID-19 EIDL program as we had for all disasters combined in the agency's 67-year history. On the capital access side, SBA issued more loans in 14 days than they had in 14 years. The scaling challenge was daunting, and while there were some hiccups along the way, SBA's IT infrastructure proved to be resilient, scalable, and adaptable to the changed business requirements, such as transitioning to the maximum telework model. When I rejoined SBA in June 2020 as the CIO, SBA had already adapted to the changed conditions due to the COVID-19 global pandemic. The flagship economic recovery programs, EIDL and PPP, were already in high gear, and the SBA workforce was rapidly surging up after smoothly transitioning to remote work. An accelerated deployment of online collaboration tools and training had helped the SBA staff to continue to be productive and not miss a beat while maintaining a robust security posture. FITARA had solidified the coordination and collaboration between the CIO and the Chief Human Capital Officer and the Chief Procurement Officer. These two relationships and the supporting infrastructure that resulted were the key underpinning foundation that enabled SBA's surge for the pandemic response. We tend to focus on technology with CIO-related activities, but FITARA took a much broader approach to how the CIO becomes a valued mission partner in the agency. The pandemic relief, and more specifically the CARES Act, brought into clear relief how important these relationships are. Had they not existed prior to the passage of the CARES Act, there is likely no way SBA could have responded with the speed that we did. SBA surged from approximately 5,000 employees to over 18,000 in only a couple of months. Hiring of that scale was unheard of prior to the pandemic, but the personnel relationships that had developed and cultivated were crucial to this rapid expansion. Similarly, the need for immediate increase in technical support for the agency's systems and employees called for acquiring huge volumes of laptops for remote work, servers, cloud services, software licenses, and contracted support teams. This was a testament to the great team that procurement organization had in place. The ability to surge to the level that was needed to support all the CARES Act activity was enabled by the tight nexus that had been formed with the CIO and CFO through FITARA. Looking back now, it's hard to imagine how SBA would have been able to support the CARES Act activities successfully without the prior work that had been prescribed by FITARA. I'd like to highlight other legislation as well. One of the many IT modernization tools you provided government agency is the IT Working Capital Fund, provided for under the MGT Act. We've taken full advantage of this capability that afforded great flexibilities to CIOs, especially in agencies like ours, where we deal primarily with one-year appropriations. The Working Capital Fund allows SBA to have a long-term vision for modernization with a managed resource pool to ensure that that vision is realized. This tool helped bolster FITARA by strengthening the collaborative bond with the CIO has with the CFO to execute the agency's mission. MGT was a welcome adjunct to FITARA and has allowed SBA to better plan and resource expenditures on a multi-year horizon. A sampling of some of these projects included modernizing SBA's infrastructure, unifying and enhancing the customer experience, updating support for all small business certification programs, and improving systems that manage entrepreneurial development, to name just a few. I want to circle back on FITARA, though, to highlight that none of the success comes without the critical support of the administrator and our immediate leadership team. FITARA is very clear about the importance of the relationship between the department or agency head and the CIO. That importance cannot be overstated, but I don't know that a solid line in an organization chart always captures the level of support that the CIO receives. I understand that scoring the FITARA scorecard reflects less favorably for SBA and other CIOs without a solid line relationship, but I can tell you personally that I have unmitigated and total support from both the former and current administrators. While that's a feature and vision in FITARA, I know this may not always manifest itself the same way in every agency. I'm fortunate. SBA's top leadership always ensures the CIO has direct access and has a seat at the table and their voice is heard. The visibility and inclusion helps to ensure that the decisions do not get made in a vacuum or in a siloed fashion, and that such resources are allocated such that the maximum benefit is realized across the agency. In closing, it bears repeating that the extensive improvement in SBA operations is a direct result of the implementation of FITARA. Thank you for the opportunity to share SBA's progress on FITARA implementation, and we look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Bluestein. Mr. Brune, you are recognized for your 5-minute summary testimony.
Thank you, Chairman Connolly, Ranking Member Heiss, and members of the subcommittee. I am Sean Brune, Social Security Administration's Deputy Commissioner for Systems and Chief Information Officer. Thank you for inviting me to discuss the role of information technology and the Federal Information Technology Acquisition Reform Act, or FITARA, in delivering Social Security services to the public. As a former regional commissioner, I know how vital modern technology is to carrying out our mission. I also appreciate the importance of managing and monitoring information technology investments, a key tenet of FITARA. Effective use of technology is mission essential. Our employees use technology to collect and store information, pay benefits, and identify and prevent fraud and improper payments. We have known for years that we must modernize our IT, and we are well on our way, phasing out legacy systems and aligning our IT infrastructure with FITARA requirements. We began modernizing our IT framework by building a virtual private network, or a VPN, nearly 2 decades ago. Since then, we have continued these efforts. In 2015, we began replacing desktop computers with laptops. In 2017, we released an initial comprehensive 5-year IT modernization plan. And in 2019, we converted to soft phones for improved mobility and established the role of the Chief Business Officer to partner with the CIO and ensure our IT investments are customer-focused. Our initial 2017 IT modernization plan focused on replacing aging systems and improving service through technology. In 2020, we updated this plan to accelerate delivery of modern software and expand self-service options. The 2020 update is our current roadmap, and we will continue to update it and prioritize IT initiatives as needed to align with agency strategic goals. The pandemic underscored the importance of IT to our mission and highlighted the success of our modernization efforts. Last March, when we shifted to telework to keep everyone safe, our secure VPN, laptops, and soft phones helped us transition over 90% of Social Security employees and thousands of state employees who make medical determinations to telework within a few weeks. Technology has allowed us to continue to serve the public through online and telephone services, while we limited in-person service to critical situations. The pandemic also emphasized the need to further expand electronic self-service options for the public and to restructure outdated work processes. To meet our customers' needs, we quickly implemented new electronic signature options, modern processes for submitting forms online, and increased our use of video to conduct disability hearings. This year, we began rolling out a modern unified communications platform to improve customer service when people call us. We are also revamping our public-facing website, socialsecurity.gov, to streamline content and redesign the homepage. We plan to fully implement the new website next year. Technology supports improving public service. FITARA and this committee's scorecard help us assess our progress in managing our IT infrastructure and provide guideposts for improvement. In accordance with FITARA, we make informed funding decisions on IT investments by leveraging some commercial off-the-shelf products and executing incremental product deployment. As a result, we have maximized resources, expand digital services on our online channel, My Social Security, and ensured the security and stability of these new service options. Moving forward, we will offer more streamlined and automated self-service options and enhance in-office service for people who need them while maintaining our robust cybersecurity program. We appreciate President Biden's fiscal year 2022 discretionary request of $14.2 billion, which will help us continue to build the secure, efficient, customer-centric IT infrastructure of tomorrow. In closing, I want to thank our Social Security employees for the resilience and dedication to our mission during this challenging time. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today to update you on SSA's progress, and I look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Brune, right on time. And we join you in thanking all of our dedicated public servants and all of our federal agencies who have continued to function and serve the American public during this unprecedented pandemic. Thank you. Ms. Harris, welcome back. What do we need to know?
Thank you.
You are recognized.
Chairman Connolly, Ranking Member Heiss, and members of the subcommittee, I want to thank you and your excellent staff for your continued oversight of federal IT management and cybersecurity with this 12th set of grades. Your scorecard continues to serve as a key barometer for measuring FITARA implementation, as well as other essential IT reform initiatives. Since the December 2020 scorecard, progress made by the agencies to implement FITARA has slowed a bit, with 18 agencies' overall grades unchanged, 2 with decreases, and only 4 with increased grades. Most agencies received a passing C or higher grade, with DOJ receiving the only D. GSA was the only agency to receive an A for this iteration. I'll now share some key highlights from this 12th scorecard. First, cybersecurity continues to be an area of struggle for the agencies. 1/3 of them have a D or F, and another third are getting by with a C. This is also consistent with our body of work in federal cybersecurity. We have reported on the agency's need to address information security program weaknesses, including establishing an enterprise-wide cyber risk management program. For example, in July 2019, we found that while the 23 civilian agencies almost always designated a risk executive, they had not fully incorporated other key risk management practices, such as setting up a process for assessing agency-wide cybersecurity risks. Having mature cyber risk management programs would help agencies improve in the areas the IGs are looking at, and in turn, increase their cyber grades on the scorecard. As another example, in December 2020, we found that few civilian agencies had implemented foundational practices to mitigate global IT supply chain risks. In the wake of the SolarWinds incident, which involved a software supply chain compromise, the need for robust and comprehensive supply chain risk management program is essential. We have roughly 950 open recommendations to the agencies and OMB covering a range of cyber-related issues, and actions are needed on these to help improve our nation's cybersecurity posture. Now to my second point, about half of the agencies have an MGT working capital fund or have plans to set one up by 2022. These funding vehicles, along with the Technology Modernization Fund, are intended to help agencies tackle their legacy IT problem. At least 60% of the federal government's IT spend each year goes towards maintaining aging systems. Only 13% is spent on modernization projects. Establishing these funds are critical so that savings from data center optimization and portfolio stat efforts can be reinvested in agency IT modernization priorities. And the recent gains by the agencies in this area would not have been possible without your persistent leadership. So thank you very much there. I'll now turn my comments to SBA and SSA. These agencies collectively plan to spend $2.1 billion on IT this year. SBA spends about 80% of its IT budget maintaining legacy systems, while SSA's is about 60%. SBA has an overall C+ grade, which is a slight decrease from its solid B+ performance in years past. SSA has made some noteworthy progress from its D grade on the first scorecard back in 2015 to a B+ today. Some positive areas to highlight for both. They have achieved their data center closure goals as well as completed most of their optimization and savings goals for the fiscal year. The SBA and SSA CIOs also report directly to the heads of their agencies. For SBA, progress in the area of IT portfolio review continues to be lacking. Its savings ratio was ranked 21st among the agencies, with $14 million in reported savings and cost avoidances since 2012. For SSA, the level of transparency in its evaluation of major IT investments could be improved. The agency spent $177 million on major IT in fiscal year 2021 and did not rate any of those investments as red, leaving SSA ranked 20th among the agencies in risk transparency. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my comments on the overall scorecard and the results for these two agencies, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. I just editorially want to remind everyone, the word Mr. Issa and I wrote into the law is consolidation, not optimization. And it is a legal requirement to consolidate data centers. When we began that effort, Mr. Vivek Kundra, then well, I guess he was CTO, but he estimated, I want to say, this is 2009, that the federal government overall had something like 1,800 data centers. And he proposed we cut them in half. And in our law, we basically said, we'll cut that in half again, get them down to 450 or something like that. Well, when we had our first hearing on how we're doing, we not only didn't make any progress in consolidation, the only progress we made was in identifying the fact that we had a lot more data centers than we thought. And I want to say it was something ridiculous, like 12,000 or something like that, the first iteration. So we got really good at identifying, oh, there's one, and there's another one. But our point was it's inefficient, and there are savings to be had, and we have to do that. And so you inherit this slight contretemps from OMB that has sought, from our point of view, to dilute what the law stipulates. We don't, and it's not just that we're being juridical. We honestly think it is a worthy goal to urge people to consolidate and move to the cloud. So we want to work with you, and that's just an editorial comment, not a question, but we can get into that later. The chair now recognizes the distinguished Congresswoman from the District of Columbia, our friend Ms. Norton, for her 5 minutes of questions. Ms. Norton.
Thank my good friend and regional partner, Mr. Connolly, for this hearing. And I want to ask questions about how outdated our legacy systems are and what we can do to modernize them. We saw examples of that during the pandemic, which is why I want to raise this issue, because they prevented continuity of agency operations in some critical cases. Let me start with Ms. Martano, because I appreciate your remarks on the importance of modernizing federal IT. Now, I want to recognize the complexity of that process, which unfortunately gets oversimplified by thinking about certain systems as either legacy or modern. So, Ms. Martano, can you talk about how to look at the modernization process and the prioritization of federal IT modernization efforts?
Thank you for that question. I appreciate it. I think you hit on a key point, which is modernization is a continuous process. Every system is at a different stage of needing modernization. And we have a complex set of environmental challenges with both end-of-life systems that we have to modernize across the federal enterprise, and also innovative and evolving technology that we would like to continue to support, like the Cloud Smart initiative, and continuing to move our federal workforce and our IT posture into the safest, most secure disposition that we possibly can. So I think that the opportunity to utilize programs like TMF are really a significant movement forward in our ability to actually deal with the IT modernization challenges in front of the government.
Thank you. Let me go to Mr. Brune because of how far the Social Security may be. In 2017, Social Security spoke of a 5-year IT modernization plan. I'd like to know how this plan has helped Social Security prioritize the retirement of legacy systems.
Thank you, Congresswoman, for the question. We are in the tail end of the 4th year of our 5-year modernization plan. That plan has focused on addressing older legacy core mission systems, the systems that are used to pay retirement insurance benefits, disability insurance benefits, and to issue Social Security number cards. We are on track, on schedule, and on budget with our plan. We appreciate that Congress has appropriated dedicated appropriations to support our multi-year plan, which has allowed us to plan and execute development and procurement across fiscal years. Some of the results of our plan are increased use of our online channel. We have over 60 million persons across the nation who have a My Social Security account, a secure portal where they can see, as the federal CIO said in her opening statement, what the status of their Social Security benefits is. If they're still working and planning for future retirement, they can get an online estimate of their personalized retirement at any point in time. If they filed a claim, they can check on their on the website or on their phone what the status of their claim is. We've also improved our use of the online channel and the phone channel for handling work during the pandemic by allowing scheduled appointments and by increasing our use of video service.
I see my time has expired. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Norton. And I would just add, Mr. Broom, to your list of impressive achievements, I've been impressed with your ability to flag fraud or attempted fraud, which I think is really a protection for the American consumer and beneficiary of Social Security. I don't know quite how you do it, but I was almost a victim myself, and it was Social Security that caught it and had a solution for it. So I was personally really impressed. And if you're doing that across the board, that's a great use of technology to protect the American people. Mr. Heiss is recognized for his 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Harris, let me begin with you. You brought up in your testimony that some of the top items, in fact, really the top item, I believe, was your wording that GAO lists for action deals with cybersecurity. And I certainly agree with you on that. But looking at the current scorecard that we have makes me just wonder a couple things. First of all, is cyber, in your opinion, weighed heavily enough in the FITARA scorecard?
Well, I think that certainly I'm always happy to have my team work with you and your staff to make sure that the purpose of the scorecard is meeting your oversight needs first and foremost. When it comes to cybersecurity, I think that it's multidimensional, and certainly with the FISMA grade itself as it's shown on the scorecard, I mean that's measuring one dimension of cybersecurity, but there are certainly others. So again, when we take a look at the scorecard, it's really ensuring that it's fulfilling the purposes of your committee and as far as oversight is concerned. So we're happy to take a look and evolve that at your direction.
Well, based on that, then, would you be in favor, or do you think it would be wise for us as a subcommittee to consider cybersecurity as an independent issue? Should there be a scorecard that focuses specifically on cyber?
We'd be happy to entertain that and see what can be done. I think one of the challenges that we have as far as either expanding the current FITARA scorecard to include additional areas of cybersecurity or having a standalone cyber scorecard is the availability of public data, because certainly we don't want to put agencies at greater risk in identifying those and pointing out those vulnerabilities publicly. So I think that's the greatest challenge that we face.
Yeah, no doubt. That's a challenge, and we've got to be very careful with that. At the same time, to have appropriate oversight as it relates to cyber issues, we need some sort of, within this context of this hearing, a scorecard to determine how are we doing on the cyber issues. So you would be willing to work with us on trying to figure out some sort of plan. And when I say us, it would be me and the chairman as well. I mean, let's try to deal with this. Let me ask you this, and this is a question I've had for a long time, and I think you are the one to ask. In previous FITARA hearings, it was stated that over $22 billion have been saved, attributed directly to FITARA. I can't figure out where that figure comes from. What is the metric? How is that figure determined?
It's agency reported data, and that's coming out of data center consolidation as well as portfolio stat efforts. And we have not taken a systematic look at the savings that are being reported by the agencies in terms of how they are reinvesting that, or first of all, collecting and reporting the total savings that they're getting from these initiatives, as well as how they are reinvesting it. So, but I can tell you, though, that what you just cited right there comes from data center consolidation and portfolio stat initiatives.
But we're not looking into it to see if it's accurate. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Well, we have not, but we're certainly happy to take a deeper look into that. I think that that would be a very insightful review that we would be happy to do for you.
Yeah, I think it would be very insightful too. And you know, obviously, we don't have the same, don't have access to the same information you have in looking at all this. But I see this number thrown out there, and I'm just curious. I mean, it's a great number if it's accurate, but I want to know where does this come from and what is the accuracy of it. And it sounds like you really have the same kind of questions because you've not been able to dig deep to see.
Yep.
Just okay, all right. Well, with that, Mr. Chairman, I will yield back.
I thank the chair. I thank the ranking member, and I just caution, let's verify that number right after our elections. All right. The incredible gentleman from Massachusetts who represents my family back home in Boston, Mr. Lynch. Welcome, and you are recognized for your questioning.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for this very, very important hearing. You know, I would like to just offer this out to the witnesses. You know, there's such a gap in IT talent generally, but especially in the federal government because we've got this turnover. We all have bright young people that come to work for us, and when they gain a certain amount of ability and technical skill, they move on because of higher salaries that we cannot offer them. But generally, in the IT workforce across the federal government, there's a real skills gap. I think right now we've got about a little more than 3% of the IT workers in the federal government are under 30 years of age. And half of the IT workforce is over 50. So we got to think about playing the long game here. You know, China does this. They think in terms of decades. And one of the solutions, I think, is really to have federal resources, encourage and build incentives for young people to get into STEM-related professions. So I founded in Boston, I founded a charter school based on STEM. Basically, what we did was we took the curriculum that the regular public schools has in Boston, and then we tripled the amount of math and science that these kids are exposed to over their grammar school and high school lives. So we're having great results. And that's without incentives, right? That's just offering that school, and it's a lottery. We have probably one of the most diverse populations in that school. Kids of every race, ethnicity. It's a marvel to behold. But we need to do more on a bigger scale. And I'm just wondering, do we have any programs that, let's say, offer these young people help with their student loans, or are there any programs where we actually support schools like my charter school that focus on STEM education so that we create this workforce of the future? There's such a huge gap right now. We can't close it in the short term, not under the existing circumstances, but over time, we can close this gap, but only if we take deliberate action and we stick to it. And I'm just wondering on that skills gap issue, if any of our witnesses have any recommendations or any examples that provide best practices on how to fill that gap and how to put the right people in the right positions to move the country forward and to protect us.
Ms. Modernization, I think you're best positioned to begin to answer that question.
Thank you.
Ms. Valderrama, I think you're best positioned to begin to answer that question. Ms. Valderrama, I think you're best positioned to begin to answer that question. Ms. Valderrama, I think you're best positioned to begin to answer that question. Ms. Valderrama, I think you're best positioned to begin to answer that question. Ms. Valderrama, I think you're best positioned to begin to answer that question. Ms. Valderrama, I think you're best positioned to begin to answer that question. Ms. Valderrama, I think you're best positioned to begin to answer that question. Ms. Valderrama, I think you're best positioned to begin to answer that question. Ms. Valderrama, I think you're best positioned to begin to answer that question. Ms. Valderrama, I think you're best positioned to begin to answer that question. Ms. Valderrama, I think you're best positioned to begin to answer that question. Ms. Valderrama, I think you're best positioned to begin to answer that question. Ms. Valderrama,
Thank you very much for the question. The administration is focused on building a world-class team of professionals with skills in these critical technology areas. We have an enormous resource in our federal government with our federal employees. I really encourage us to continue to look at reskilling and upskilling opportunities in our government with our own federal workforce. In addition to that, there are numerous programs that are going on across the federal government, the United States Digital Service, 18F, the Civic Fellows Program. So there is a lot of effort in this area, and I think that we have a great opportunity because people have a desire to serve our country. And there are many different channels that we can plug into to make that opportunity available. I am a great example of someone who came to do a tour of service and wound up being so inspired by the mission that I felt the need to stay and continue to work in this environment. So I think that there are opportunities. I know the administration is focused on making sure that our workforce looks like our country and that we have opportunities to recruit cyber talent, IT talent, and other subject matter experts across our government. Thank you.
I appreciate that, Ms. Martorana, but it's a different, well, first of all, it's a smaller pool of people when you just look at our federal employees. And I personally know some federal employees that are still walking around with flip phones. So what we're trying to do is increase that pool of talent. It will not only help the federal government, it'll help private industry, and first of all, it'll help those kids because we have found that regardless of background, if you have a program of total immersion with these young people, and you have a 12-year runway of their education, you can really make a big impact on increasing the pool of talent and the quality of that talent going forward. So if we're training somebody who's 50 years old, there's a limited horizon for that worker between investing, training, and then they're off into retirement. So what I'm suggesting is to lengthen out that runway and populate it with a much larger population that we could train. But maybe that's something I need to work on in terms of, a scholarship program or something like that would be available to these grammar schools. It does fit very neatly with the president's initiative to offer universal pre-K, where we get kids in at that early age, and we provide them with the rudimentary beginnings of an education in STEM. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I thank you for your kindness. I thank you for all the great work that you do. I want to thank our witnesses. Very important issue, and I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lynch. And you really raised a good point about the need to recruit and retain the workforce of the next generation. And I would love to work with you, Mr. Lynch. I have a bill I'm developing on using a federal internship program to populate the vacancies we're projecting for the future. We do a lousy job in federal interns compared to the private sector. And so it's something ripe for improvement that could actually be a huge part of the solution, including in the IT sector itself. So I look forward to working with you, Mr. Lynch, on that.
Happy to do that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Lynch. Mr. Keller is recognized for his 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Connolly and Ranking Member Heiss, for having this hearing. Also, thank you to our witnesses for participating and joining us this afternoon. The FITARA Scorecard remains a valuable tool in assessing the modernization of the federal government's IT system and cybersecurity infrastructure. Strengthening our nation's IT infrastructure and cyber grid is a goal we can all work toward. The federal government spends roughly $100 billion on cybersecurity and IT investments annually, yet we still face challenges securing some of our nation's most sensitive IT systems. These challenges have been highlighted by the recent events such as the Colonial Pipeline and SolarWinds cyber attacks. Congress and the administration must now look at cost-effective strategies to improve our nation's IT systems and cyber readiness. Ms. Martirana, I have concerns regarding the cost of implementing technological changes. In December of 2019, Congress appropriated about $125 million to the Technology Modernization Fund. However, agencies encountered financial problems with monitoring the fund. As of June of 2021, approximately $89 million of the fund has been awarded to 11 projects across 7 federal agencies. Not even 10% of the money allocated for these in this fund. What tools can Congress provide to OMB to improve cost estimating practices?
Thank you very much for that question. OMB is committed to full transparency in federal IT spending and performance data. So we would welcome feedback and continued collaboration on making sure that we are completely transparent on those numbers. With relation to the Technology Modernization Fund, I can't speak very in detail about what happened prior to me joining, but I can tell you a little bit about how we are utilizing the Technology Modernization Fund since we've been appropriated the additional $1 billion under the American Rescue Plan. We have, as I said in my opening statement, we have 108 projects that have come in from 43 different agencies, and I think it really represents the market demand for flexible IT modernization funding and our ability to work collaboratively to continue on the IT modernization journey that most agencies have a pretty significant backlog in their own portfolio for these projects.
You had mentioned that you couldn't speak before you came into the agency. Are some of the same people in the agency today that were in when we had appropriated the money before with this new money that you referenced in the American Rescue Plan?
I'm sure that there are some OMB employees that have been in tenure during the length of TMF being stood up. But I can really tell you, since I have joined, there is a real commitment not only to the TMF and the IT Modernization Fund, but we are having very active conversations with all of the staff at OMB about agencies' needs focused on cybersecurity as a primary, but IT modernization goes hand in hand with cybersecurity.
So you've taken proactive steps to make sure the same thing doesn't happen with this money as happened with the previous money that you can't tell us about, I mean, that you can't reference since you weren't there?
Yeah, we are working kind of on a two-pronged strategy. One is when we identified the payment flexibility for TMF under the American Rescue Plan, we put out a call to agencies saying to come and tell us in 4 category areas where you need the most investment, and that was high-value assets that need to be modernized, cybersecurity, public-facing digital services that were identified through the COVID pandemic, and shared services where multiple agencies could benefit. And so under that framework, agencies came to us with this 108 project proposals, and they're still coming on a rolling basis. We also, as a board, want to take a top-down look as well to see where we can have the greatest impact across the greatest number of agencies. So take an area like cybersecurity. We don't start from a blank piece of paper, right? At any of the my fellow CIOs would probably attest to the same. We are all trying to solve the same problems, whether we have legacy IT, end-of-life systems, or systems that are a little bit more modern but could benefit from innovation that's going on in the private sector. So we are looking from a top-down perspective as well as really trying to source from agencies' need directly.
But no specific tools that Congress needs to provide at this point in time to OMB to improve cost estimating practices. I mean,
I think I would look forward to working with you and your staff and continuing to have a conversation about that.
okay. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Keller. I would just observe that the witness said something I think that's really important that goes to part of your question and what Mr. Heiss was getting at earlier. Cybersecurity is not a separate topic compartmentalized from the IT system in place. If you're working with a legacy system, many of them were developed long before encryption was developed, and they aren't adaptable or not easily adaptable. They are vulnerable systems. That's why our effort here at modernizing IT is directly related to cyber capability. They are not separate subjects, and I think your question gets at that. And I really appreciate the answer of the CIO of the federal government, because that often gets overlooked. Thank you so much. The gentlelady, our vice chair for this subcommittee, Ms. Porter, is recognized for her 5 minutes. Welcome.
Thank you very much. In June 2019, about 2 years ago, the Office of Management and Budget issued a memorandum that updated reporting requirements for federal data centers. Among other things, this guidance redefined a data center as a purpose-built, physically separate, dedicated space that meets certain criteria. And as a result, agencies have excluded about 4,500 data centers from their inventories. Ms. Harris, is OMB's current guidance on federal data centers in compliance with FITARA?
The short answer is no.
I'll take the short answer, Ms. Harris, because I get them so infrequently in Congress. Is OMB's current guidance a good practice from a cybersecurity standpoint?
Well, I mean, I think that from a cybersecurity standpoint, there are other vehicles in place that may be able to address the cybersecurity risk exposure on the data center. So I think the larger concern that we have in terms of dropping the non-tiered data centers is our ability to have transparency and be able to track these centers and be able to stay aggressive in consolidation efforts, so that, because there is still money that we're leaving on the table here. So from that perspective, and also an optimization perspective too, ensuring that these centers are fully optimized. We're not able to get that if we don't have a better idea of what's in the inventory.
And following this subcommittee's FITARA 10.0 hearing, OMB submitted responses to the chairman's questions for the record on this data center guidance. And in its response to the question about this change in the data center definition, OMB stated that they, quote, removed requirements and reporting to align with industry standards while also reducing the reporting burden that was time-consuming and expensive. OMB also said to focus on data centers deemed to be key mission facilities. Ms. Harris, in GAO's work, have you seen non-tiered data centers that are key mission facilities?
Well, we certainly want to, I think that there is a middle ground here. I think the pendulum has swung a little too far in terms of what we have omitted in the data center inventory or the data center definition, but we don't necessarily want or need to track individual desktops. I think that from a reporting perspective, that is burdensome to the agencies, but we also need to—
You're cutting my time, Ms. Harris, and I think you're exactly right. So I want to point out some of what's being left out. Since OMB issued its guidance, the State Department data center reporting has dropped by more than half. And you're right, we don't need to track every laptop. But for example, State Department no longer reports on 2 10,000 plus square foot facilities. The Social Security Administration, Mr. Brune, has 7 facilities between 4,500 and 9,600 square feet that are no longer subject to these reporting requirements. You mentioned the value of transparency. Why is transparency so important when we're talking about these significantly sized facilities? Ms. Harris?
I, I agree with you. I think that the examples that you just mentioned are reasons why we should be reevaluating the definition of what constitutes a data center, because we do want to keep track of some of the non-tier data centers, particularly the fairly big ones that you just identified, and make sure that they are, following the requirements of the DCOI initiative and are subject to the, the reporting requirements associated with that initiative.
Thank you very much, Ms. Harris. I think that's extremely helpful. Having heard what you have to say, Ms. Martirana, will you commit to working with this subcommittee to ensure proper oversight and transparency into these significantly sized, mission-critical, non-tier data centers?
Thank you very much for that, and I'll give you another easy answer. Yes, I will commit to continuing to have that conversation and working together.
This is my lucky day. I rarely get two yes and no's in the same hearing. I feel very, very blessed to be participating in this today. I think it's really important that the American public understand that the lack of transparency makes it impossible to fully protect taxpayer money and ensure that agencies are tracking all potential security vulnerabilities. So I really appreciate OMB stepping up here and committing to doing what they can to not leave money on the table, to not leave us exposed to cyber attacks, because agencies simply find it difficult sometimes to follow best practices and the law. Thank you very much. And with that, Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Ms. Porter, thank you for your questioning. And let me just say you're a person after my own heart. Before you joined us, this was the subject I focused on and made it very clear that this subcommittee is going to insist on the letter of the law being complied with. And I would say to Ms. Harris, while we're not unsympathetic with the need for some latitude in exercising judgment, the idea of it's a burden to an agency to comply with the law, you will find us most unsympathetic to that. And we would expect your agency to be similarly unsympathetic to that. When we pass a law, we expect it to be complied with. The time to argue is while we're debating that draft legislation, not after it becomes law. Ms. Porter is absolutely right. Transparency is affected. Compliance with the law is affected. And I can just tell you, the fact that we've had 12 hearings on this subject, all about compliance with the law. No other committee in Congress that I'm aware of has ever done that. I hope demonstrates our determination to insist that this happen. We see ourselves as your partner, but we are going to insist the various components of FITARA that Mr. Issa and I wrote be complied with. And we're prepared to pass more legislation on a bipartisan basis if necessary. So Ms. Porter's points are very well taken. There's a difference between some latitude and a desire to circumvent the law. Those are two different things. And we are, I said at the outset of this hearing, we're concerned about that word optimization because it's a euphemism, we fear, for circumventing the requirement of the law. And that we're not going to go along with. And that's not a new message from this subcommittee on a bipartisan basis. So, Ms. Porter, thank you. You've made the point and very well. And we really appreciate the commitment coming out of OMB as we move forward. Mr. Issa, you are recognized. Welcome back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And as you said, this is an area where you and I had the opportunity to work together for multiple years. And if I can pick up where you just left off, Chairman, where Ms. Porter just left off, the intent, what you worked in a bulldog type way for years on, was to reduce the total number of distinct facilities that had to be managed, many of them having the basic problem of telling us they weren't large enough to be managed properly. But in a cloud world, there is only one server farm because every farm is connected. If there's only one server farm, that 45, as Ms. Porter said, that 4,500 square foot facility that is not reporting could in fact be the weak link within a single cloud that has dozens or hundreds of locations. But at the end of the day, the bad guys only have to make a cyber penetration in one place. So the very existence of those small facilities and then a claim that they cannot have the same level of transparency and perhaps not the same level of professionalism begs the question, why do they exist at all? And I want to commend the committee for continuing to work on that and for holding this hearing today. Ms. Harris, I've got a longer reaching one, a question you were not probably prepared for, but as Congressman Connolly and myself envisioned modernization under FITARA, we created the very positions, or at least gave them real strength of these CIOs. They were created and given power and a direct link to essentially their cabinet head or agency head because of a history of not having the kind of professionalism overseeing $100 billion plus in expenditures and ultimately the $4 or $5 trillion of government spending that depend on it. And then at the end of the day, 22 or $23 trillion of the American economy that, as we know, can shut down if portions of the government become inoperative. Therefore, the question I have for you as our agency is, isn't it time for us to consider looking at stringing together this network of CIOs, and particularly as to cyber, into a single point of accountability? This similarly to the Office of Personnel Management, the Office of Management and Budget, or any other cabinet head, isn't it time that the government accountability and the government ops, which is our committee, Mr. Connolly's committee now, isn't it time that we look at a reorganization that takes that $100 billion plus and creates at least one person accountable directly to the president who has the expertise to and the vision to bring together these disparate entities that are spread across the government?
Yes, I think that is what is needed, because when you look across the agencies with the proliferation of CIOs, it dilutes accountability, and so having a single point of accountability is absolutely a great idea, and I think would go a long way in improving IT management.
Well, I'm going to give each of the CIOs an opportunity to weigh in on some of their frustrations, but I would ask the chairman to consider tasking the Government Accountability Office with some further study on that to help the committee. But if any of the CIOs want to weigh in on some of the frustrations they see by not having a higher level of person who has the kind of expertise that each of you has. And maybe we start off with the Office of Management and Budget.
It's an interesting question to ponder. I have not really given this an enormous amount of thought prior to the question, but I think that we are making an enormous amount of progress working across the federal CIO community in an incredibly collaborative way. We are working on several projects together that are enterprise in mindset so that we are not learning, each one starting from a blank piece of paper. We think as federal CIOs of cybersecurity and IT modernization is a team sport. This is not an endeavor that any of us takes on in a silo, thinking only of our own agency. We think about our fellow colleagues. I know when I was an agency CIO, I was greatly benefited during the beginning of COVID by other CIOs who had gone on a journey well in advance of where my technology team and infrastructure was. So I think this is a team sport. We are all working very collaboratively as CIOs, but I would look forward to continuing to work together on this.
Thank you. Briefly, because the gentleman's time has expired, I want to give Mr. Bluestein and Mr. Boone an opportunity to respond briefly.
Sir, I appreciate the opportunity to respond to that. I echo Ms. Maturana's commentary. First of all, the environment amongst the CIO Council, the government CIOs, has been very collaborative, and there are certain things we're trying to break down some of these barriers. I think that goes right to Congressman Issa's point about collaboration in cybersecurity, having, whether it's some cyber entity that oversees all that, but can kind of break through some of those barriers. FITARA has been realized in my agency, so I don't want for those kinds of things, if you will, in my organization, but as we collaborate with other agencies, it would be nice in some cases if we could break down those silos while making sure that we're secure.
Mr. Brune, did you want to comment?
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Congressman, for the question. I would say that the enterprise focus is growing. Recently, the Social Security Administration joined partnership with the General Service Administration and other agencies on registration authentication for secure online accounts. The GSA administers a program, login.gov. We use that. So it's done on behalf of the public, and we can build it once, use it multiple times. That's just one example where the collaboration that the federal CIO mentioned is occurring, and I see it growing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This has been a great pleasure, and I appreciate your indulgence. So
thank you so much, Mr. Issa. And I would just editorialize as a final thought, and it goes back to a comment you made, Mr. Bluestein, about the org chart and solid line versus dotted line and all that. But Mr. Issa will remember that when we wrote FITARA, among 24 federal agencies, there were 250 people with the title CIO. Now, there is no private entity that would tolerate that. And even in writing the bill, we chose not to do it by fiat. We chose to hope that there'd be an evolution, that somebody would emerge as the primus inter pares. And the reason we've emphasized the solid line is because of this proliferation. Someone's got to be in charge. Someone's got to be designated as the responsible and accountable person who is empowered to make decisions. And in bureaucracies, if you don't report to the boss, especially public sector bureaucracies, everybody knows anything you have to say is ad referendum. I'm using some Latin today, I'm sorry. And that's what we're trying to get at. And if there's a better way to do it, we'd love to hear it. But I think both Mr. Issa and I reflect on a private sector experience and look at the federal government and say, this is a system that can't possibly work with that many people with that title. So that's what we're trying to get at. I think you would concur, Mr. Issa. Yeah. Thank you very much. Mr. LaTurner, thank you for your patience. You are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Martirana, I would like to visit with you just a little bit about the Technology Modernization Fund. As you know, it was established by Congress in 2017 to provide agencies additional ways to fund IT projects in a timely manner. Has the fund adequately lived up to its purpose?
Thank you, Congressman, for that question. I am so bullish on the Technology Modernization Fund. Not only in the way that it has managed IT projects that it did during its kind of 1.0 phase, now that we're in a 2.0 phase with the $1 billion in the American Rescue Plan funding, I see just enormous possibility. So a couple things that really stand out to me is, one is the board of TMF are all government officials that are real subject matter experts. They take their responsibility as board members very seriously. We're spending about 10 hours a week meeting and reviewing proposals currently. We have brought subject matter experts in where we feel that we might have an opportunity, as I mentioned earlier, to have a little more of a top-down view across the portfolio. So that is making me incredibly optimistic about this opportunity. The second is the repayment flexibility that has been extended to agencies under the American Rescue Plan is having a meaningful impact on agencies' ability to participate in this, right? Not all agencies have working capital funds. We know that that is continuing to evolve, but it was really a barrier of entry for people being able to participate in TMF. With the repayment flexibility loosened a bit, that has made all the difference in the world, and we know that this will continue to have an impact. The third reason that I'm really optimistic about TMF is we are using best practices in how we are reviewing projects, awarding proposals to move forward, and managing them. There's quarterly meetings with the TMF board to review progress. We only give out funds on an incremental basis based on accomplishments, milestones being met. And we are also taking corrective actions when we see that a project is not fulfilling where milestones or where we think it should be. We're bringing in subject matter experts again to partner with those agencies on corrective actions. And we are willing to stop funding should we not believe that an agency is going to be successful. So we believe that TMF is going to have improved outcomes in the IT projects that we are funding, and we hope to be able to continue to demonstrate that to the committee and to Congress.
I appreciate that. I have some additional questions on that, but I'm going to run out of time. Specifically, that my understanding is that there's $10 billion of the $60 billion for fiscal year 22 in the request that's been earmarked for cybersecurity. Could you drill down into that a little bit in the time that we have left and talk about how those funds will be allocated and spent to strengthen our cybersecurity?
Yeah, I can speak specifically to the TMF proposals that had a primary, secondary, or tertiary cybersecurity component. We asked agencies to self-identify when they were submitting a proposal. 42% of the proposals are modernizing high-priority systems, and that is, those are oftentimes mission-critical systems that are operating our federal government. So 42% are focused on upgrading, updating, and increasing the cybersecurity posture of high-value systems. The next are squarely cybersecurity requests. Agencies that are coming to us and saying that they would like to begin on the road to more modern security practices like zero trust, which is a framework for not trusting anything inside your environment and making sure that you are rigorously interrogating everything within your boundaries. It's actually eliminating boundaries. I won't get too technical, but we are focused on that. And so about 75% of all requests into TMF through the American Rescue Plan are focused on cybersecurity.
I appreciate that. It's such an important subject that I would love to spend more time on, but my time has expired. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Mr. Letourneau, thank you. And let me invite you, if you do have follow-up questions, please get them to my staff, and we will forward them to the appropriate witness.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
There is that opportunity. If we can do it within 5 days, and we ask our witnesses to be as expeditious as possible, but as thorough as possible in responding to written questions, because obviously we can't ask everything in the hearing. So happy to do that, Mr. Letourneau. Thank you. And if I can close out this hearing with some questions of my own, but Mr. Bluestein, I want to focus on you for a minute, because I think you joined the agency in June, but the avalanche for SBA occurred in April and May. So we signed the CARES Act, big bipartisan bill, a lot of money for starting a new program, the PPP. And what we did that I think put a burden on SBA, and you rightfully pointed out the magnitude of scale. So I think your annual loan portfolio is something like $20 billion a year. We gave you $600 billion in 1 month. We also lessened the requirements for eligibility. We really streamlined them. We reduced paperwork. We reduced documentation requirements because we were panicking, right? We wanted to get help to Main Street mom and pops as quickly as possible so they didn't go under. A noble goal. And we also had that program had a provision that allowed loans to be converted to grants fairly easily. Now, in doing all that with great intentions, we were relying, in a sense, on the SBA IT system, eTrans. And what happened in the first few weeks, we added, one other change, which was a big one. We broadened the financial institutions eligible to manage the portfolios. We wanted to get into communities, including communities we were targeting, low-income, communities of color, and that meant we had to look at community-based financial institutions, not the normal financial institutions that normally are the go-to managers of SBA's portfolio. And what we found was that your IT system could not handle that. It had trouble programming the changes. It had trouble managing a huge avalanche of new money in a new program, and it was overwhelmed by the demand. And I'm not citing that to criticize SBA. I cite it as an example of why IT is so important, because no one could have foreseen these circumstances. But our whole mission up here was shared by your agency, which was rush aid, run, don't walk, to get aid to these small businesses, so we're saving them and they're not going under. And while at the same time we'll have a condition, keep people on the payroll. That's the goal here. We want to keep you open, and we want to keep those people on the payroll so we're not adding to massive unemployment, which we were experiencing in April of 2020. But if you don't invest in the IT system to have the agility and the flexibility for these kinds of changes, how can you be surprised that it's overwhelmed? And your mission is defeated, not by some nefarious, person or persons wanting to muck up the works, but because the IT system can't do it. How often do we have to be reminded how critical and integral the IT system is to the mission? And we see that in unemployment insurance systems across the country, in the 50 state unemployment insurance systems. We see it at the IRS in getting payments. We're changing the IRS mission, in a sense, or broadening it from a tax collector to a benefit agency. And we're a little surprised that it has some trouble, and its IT systems are older and more multiplicitous than yours. I just want to give you a chance to comment, because you came in June after all that happened, and you were kind of in the cleanup operation, but I'm sure you have some reflections about the good, the bad, and the ugly, and what we've learned from that kind of experience. And then I'll be done.
Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on that, sir. I did come in after the fact. One of the first things we did was we took a look at the entire ecosystem, because they were different systems that handled the PPP loans and the EIDL loans, and while they were somewhat disconnected, they still ran through the same system of systems that managed the capital access process. So one of the first things we did is said, let's take a look at this end to end. How do you streamline all of this so it operates on some kind of plane? And let me diverge for just a second. when all of this happened last year, and there was a presidential tweet that said SBA.gov, our website that normally handled about 600 to 700 concurrent users, went to 93,000 in a matter of minutes. Now, that was all set on a modern platform that immediately scaled to handle from about 1 terabyte a day of data to about 25 terabytes a day. So it was built to scale, and we want to bring that same technology into these financial systems. Unfortunately, a lot of times in risk management, until we actually realize the risk, people talk about it, but they won't take necessarily the measures to fix that. Now we've been in a situation where we saw the consequence, and especially with all the different things that have happened subsequent to that, different requirements, how do we slice and dice some of these things to discreetly identify either communities of interest, other things that we want to do in the system? That technology is available out there. We're going through the process now of figuring out, okay, what do we do with the system that we have? We have ETRAN, which has been there. It's legacy code. We know it. And the next step is, okay, how do we move beyond that? We're working very, very closely with the capital access folks to work through that.
Thank you so much. And I look forward to having further discussion with you about what happened and what we can take away. Because I think all of us benefit from that experience in terms of, and I would commend to you, Ms. Maturana, on your agenda of many things to get done. But I really would look at lessons learned from the pandemic in terms of IT. Because I think we could really, all of us benefit from that. There were some great things. There were some things that didn't work, some things that were disasters, and some things we could have done better. The TMF is in that context, I think, and as you were saying earlier, in terms of how we might use it to help upgrade, to help people make other investments, better investments. But I do think there are some very critical lessons to be learned from this experience, and you might very well want to take the lead on that. I think Mr. Issa suggested, Ms. Harris, that I might want to join him in urging you to look at a couple of issues, and Mr. Heiss also, and I gladly nod yes to add to your plate. Mr. Heiss, anything for the good of the order you want to add? I don't. I'm sorry. Yeah, no problem. No problem. You're going to mischief. All right. I want to thank our witnesses, and again, any member wishing to add, to submit written questions for the record, we'll be glad to provide them to our witnesses. I think this has been a thoughtful dialogue. Really appreciate the work of everybody involved. I think you can see our commitment. I know it's not the sexiest topic in the world, but to me, IT undergirds everything we're trying to do in the mission. And the mission is jeopardized if the IT doesn't work. And we have the added layer of being really concerned about cyber. And how do we protect ourselves? And as Ms. Maturana, I think, astutely observed, the two are linked. If you've got an old, clunky, antique, legacy system that cannot be encrypted or cannot easily be encrypted, you're asking for trouble. And that's why making smart investments that are cyber protected and that also take advantage of the most advanced technology better serve our constituents and protect their privacy and their interests and the national security while we're at it. With that, this hearing is adjourned.